Good night and welcome to the 2026 Budget Review. In recent weeks, global uncertainty caused by conflicts and other factors has been compounded by war in the Middle East, resulting in a sharp rise in energy prices. That affects almost everything and everyone. It against this backdrop that Minister of Finance Ryan Strawn delivered the government's budgetary proposals and financial statement on Monday. Tonight, we examine the measures he outlined and the impact on your daily lives and the country as a whole. We've heard from Parliament, we've heard from the political pundits, we've heard from the economic pundits. I'm your host, Dr. Ronnie Yearwood, and joining me are a special group of people tonight. We have Mr. James Clarke, Chairman of the Barbados Private Sector Association.
Good evening, Ronnie. Happy to be here.
Thank you for being here, James. And we have Mr. Darrell Wilson, Advisory Lead at Avenica Financial Advisory.
Thank you, Ronnie. Good evening.
Thank you, Darrell. And none other than the Queen, the Lady of the Night, Miss Maureen Holder, Executive Chairman of Barbados Consumer Environment Network.
Empowerment Network.
Empowerment Network.
Good evening, Ronnie. Good evening to my fellow panelists. It's good to be here, and I look forward to a very warm and robust discussion.
Thank you. Thank you, Maureen. Welcome to you all, and we'll get right back into the 2026 budget review after this break. Welcome back, and we're going to go to our guests for their initial thoughts on the budget. Given that the budget's had so many ratings, more than a rating agency, we won't be doing that tonight, but we're just going to drill down on what the budget means for you and get those initial reactions. James?
Thank you, Ronnie. So, initial reactions from the BPSA is that BPSA is generally in favor, very quite pleased with the budget presented because it tackles directly our current realities facing us, not just in the business community, but every one of us as citizens of Barbados. And it's done that by examining how best we can mitigate against the current threats caused by rising energy prices. So with things like caps on the VAT for electricity bills, hedging of oil, heavy fuel oil and so on, that helps with the cost, because obviously most of our electricity is generated with heavy fuel oil at the moment, some with PV, but a lot with heavy fuel oil. So therefore, the hedging also helps in stabilize the energy prices. Also the examination of things like changing how duties are calculated and VAT on the FOB prices instead of CIF for imports on personal care items and food.
Could you break that down for our viewers? Because we use a lot of these terms, FOB and CIF and.
So CIF, if something is cost, insurance, and freight. So if I buy a container load of these glasses, and I pay CIF, I pay the cost of the glasses, I pay the insurance on the glasses, and I pay the freight from wherever they're coming from to Barbados, to my supplier. And import duty and VAT is calculated on that entire sum.
Okay.
If they use the FOB value, they're using the cost of the glasses and maybe some inland freight to get it to the port, wherever it's coming from. and the duties and VAT are calculated on that value, not the insurance or the freight to get it to Barbados. So there's a savings. You're not paying duty and VAT on the freight component. So there is a savings there. And of note as well is that they've capped the value of these. If you are going to be charged freight, they've capped the freight value to $3,000 US on a 20-foot container and $6,000 on a 40. What we saw during COVID is container shipment prices, especially from the Far East, going from in the $5,000 to $6,000 US dollar range up to as high as $15,000 to $18,000. So what that does is, if the shipping rates go up, which is very well expected to happen, the calculations for when the goods land here, we're not going to be paying duties and VAT on that upcharge in freight at the moment. It's the way it's calculated.
Okay.
Yeah?
Okay. All right. Darrell, let's hear you.
Okay, I would first of all like to say that I'm very happy to be part of the national conversation on this budget and financial statement. And for me, I was very pleased with the entire budget. And I thought that the Minister of Finance did a very good job at trying to touch everybody. Of course, there will always be ways that you can find to say that somebody was missed. For me, the number one thing that I was looking forward to was the mention of the road development and flyovers. That was my number one ask for this budget, because it's a very painful thing that we endure in traffic, trying to get to and from places, and invariably people are late. I wouldn't say that it was perfect, because there are some things that I was looking for, and I think you have to keep it in context, because I believe the government approaches things from a maternalistic perspective as opposed to a paternalistic perspective, which is perhaps what we moved from and to. And in doing so, I believe the government seeks to take care of everyone in a maternalistic manner, which has implications for our autonomy. And if you think about it, you can see where the government finds every possible way to give somebody something. And then because that has become fashionable, then those opposing it would say, no, don't give 300, give 600. And I think this creates a culture of consumption and dependency. And, while we say, or the government says that we want to stop poor people from being poor, many of these measures don't seek to develop a culture of investment. And the people who invest naturally don't need to be told this. And we have a prime minister, or their prime minister, who is heard globally, and she's loved in every country, and she's listened to. So some of the things that she says, with the greatest respect, can sort of cause people to sort of look out for what next, instead of seeking to take care of themselves and rise in autonomy as astute, financially intelligent individuals.
Darrell, you opened something there. I'm going to stick a pin and I'm going to connect it to what James said, because I think what you're both alluding to is that the budget is supporting more consumer spending and consumption rather than investment. But we can come to that point. I'm going to hand it over to Maureen now.
Well, Ronnie, for BSAN, we thought that the budget offered much timely relief to the situation that is occurring externally. We felt that the measures like VAT reductions on electricity, fuel tax cuts, caps on freight-related costs, they were not just policy choices. We felt that they were defensive action, or it was a set of defensive measures taken to combat what we would call imported inflation. So for us, we felt that the government was very decisive and responsible and responsive in terms of taking action to deal with the likely burden or the impact, negative impact, that would have been placed on households and the various vulnerable groups in our society. So from our perspective, that is good and well, and it's a very, we would also want to applaud the government's 6 mission transformation agenda, which looked at climate change. It looked at I'm trying to remember all of them, but they're not coming to mind. Climate change, digital transformation, economic diversification. That 6 mission transformation agenda shows that the government is moving away from stabilization into transformation. But I want to talk about the transformation part of it, because unless the budget can actually be implemented in a way that the benefits extend throughout all the various social classes in Barbados, all we would have gotten from the government is just nice intentions, good measures on paper, but in practice, they offer very little in terms of benefits to consumers. But we applaud the government because it's a first step in the right direction in terms of combating imported inflation and in terms of offering immediate relief. But the issue here for us is implementation and whether or not there will be the benefits in terms of the cost savings from all of the measures implemented to help, the average person with their purse and to manage their finances, if those benefits will be passed down or trickled down to consumers and general publics. I will say more, but I want to hear from the private sector as well as the lead financial analyst here, because I think that the budget needs to be drilled down so that you look at its structural implications. Is there room for the budget to actually do the kind of structural undertaking that is necessary to truly transform Barbados? We're talking about modernizing Barbados. Modernizing is fine, but it doesn't do the kind of structural transformation that Barbados ought to be undertaken given the kind of context that we're living in. But it's fair, and I'm not going to mark it. Just like you, I will not grade it, but it's a good first step in terms of relief for consumers.
Okay, well, so we've got those initial opening comments, and there's a thread between them in terms of what James was saying about consumer spending, what Darrell is talking about in terms of the framing that budget needs to encourage people to invest and to uplift themselves and have more autonomy over personal space, and then what you're saying, Maureen, about implementation and change in society. So really what we're all speaking about and what we need to drill down, and I don't think anybody's really done this in the other spaces, is how does a budget transform a society and transform lives beyond the immediate short-term gains, because essentially that's what the government's trying to do with any big policy, and we'll get to that. But before we come back to that, let's listen to the man who was in the hot seat on Monday, Minister Ryan Strawn, as he talked about the national fuel importer, the Barbados National Energy Company, locking in the price of heavy fuel oil, which powers the electricity generation, at $92 per barrel for the next 3 months. So let's hear from the minister himself.
Essentially what the government did was to lock in the price of heavy fuel oil ahead of time to protect Barbadians from further price spikes in the international market over the next 3 months. So it is like agreeing to a fixed price today, so that if prices rise tomorrow, you are protected.
So we've just heard the minister saying that they're going to lock in the price of fuel for the next 3 months. What do you see in terms of the benefits of this? Obviously, there are obvious benefits, James, from the private sector's point of view. How do you think that will affect prices? Should we expect prices to stay stable at least for the next 3 months? We all appreciate that there's a global crisis and that there could be price increases, but here we've seen the government done its part to try to lock in the price of energy. Will that lock-in be passed on to consumers? And Maureen, we're going to hear from you definitely about that, but let's start, James.
So it is right. All these various measures are to try to introduce that stability into a very, very volatile situation. All right, so that we don't feel the full impact of the increases in energy prices, increases in therefore increases in our electricity, increases in food costs, and so on and so forth. There will, though, possibly come a time, given if things continue the way they are, it is possible that you will see price increases from source markets. Okay, an example is food. So let's take food. Many fertilizers rely on petrochemical product, either the product itself or the energy from it, to be produced. Okay, that then goes into growing food, whether that be grains, soybeans, corn, whatever it is coming here. If the cost of that goes up, or there's any drop off in production, then that can cause the prices to rise. Okay, so the prices then introduced in the budget can help mitigate that, like against the freight rates and so on, and that will ease us on the freight. But when it comes to the actual first cost of the item, there's always that potential for it to go up. So the government is trying its level best in an extremely difficult environment to modulate the prices as best as possible for us, hoping over the next 3 months that there is some resolution to what is going on in the Middle East. But bear in mind that given the extent of the damage and what is happening, that it's not like turning on and off a light switch. It doesn't stop tomorrow and then the light switch turns back on and everything flows as normal. There's significant damage to the energy infrastructure in that part of the world, and it may take some time. So I think, again, the government is trying to do its level best to shield consumers from these issues.
Okay.
Yeah.
We're going to get, Maureen, we're going to come to you, but let's hear the Minister on government absorbing some of the increased costs expected from the rise in electricity, and then you can give your comments on both in terms of how you think consumers should feel that in the pipeline. So this is what Minister Strawn had to say.
Without that intervention, the April electricity bill for the average household would rise by an estimated $32 above what it was in March. The government is absorbing half of that difference, $16 on top of what it is doing in containing the increase through purchasing the hedge at $92 for the next 3 months. In simple terms, the government is also covering half of the electricity increase so that Barbadians do not feel the full impact of rising energy prices.
Maureen, over to you.
Again, you're not being critical of what the government has done, but these are relief measures. Relief measures, they're not solutions, because we have not addressed the root cause of the high cost of living, which is structural. And you need to dig down and get to the structure of the thing before you completely transform it. So we have to appreciate what government has done. Remember, they are relief measures which could end at any time. And if oil prices go up tomorrow, it will reflect on the bill, largely because of how the fuel clause adjustment is structured and largely because of the Electricity Act. So, the government can try its best to help ease the burden off of the consumers, but at the end of the day, the structural issues, if you're not careful, those structural issues will erode any goodwill or any good intention that the government expects to occur as a result of the measures it has undertaken. So I think it's important for us to go back and say, well, in the context of what is happening, government has done well, but they do not go far enough in terms of changing, transforming Barbados, because the structural problems are still there and it could not have been dealt with in this budget.
All right. We're going to thank you for that, Maureen. We're going to go to a break. Welcome back to the 2026 budget review. We're going to go to the Minister one more time to have the view on the cap on VAT collected on gas and diesel, and this has been extended. And after we hear from the Minister, Darrell, I want you to weigh in on that and what it means for the consumer, and then we're going to shoot it over to Maureen and James for their opinion before some other discussions.
In addition, with effect from April 1st, 2026, the excise charge on gasoline will be reduced for 3 months from 99.39 cents to 89.39 cents per litre, and on diesel from 44.03 cents to 34.03 cents. The Barbados National Energy Company Limited will also reduce the rate of its recovery of its 2022 losses from the 9 cents per litre to 4 cents per litre.
We see here is effectively the government trying to cushion the price increases on gas and diesel by capping the VAT. So your take, Darrell?
Well, I don't think the government had a choice, and the timing is that this has happened at the same time that the budget had to be presented. I think if we were in November or October, I believe the government would have stepped in to do something, because this is actually an emergency. There's a war, which some say is a potential world war. So I think it is a good thing, but given the nature of the government, I couldn't see them doing anything other than that. And that cap will definitely help people, that goes without saying, and it's a commendable move. But I don't necessarily see that as being a part of the budget, because it's a 3-month measure, similar to the hedging, which I think shows a level of maturity and financial sophistication and innovation on the part of the minister and his advisors. I think we need to consider this separately and outside of the budget, because we don't know what will happen after 3 months, and I think we need to consider this measure as just the government's response to an emergency and still happening within the budget. Because they did say that this war changed some of their plans that we would have seen had it not happened.
Yeah, and I think that has to be appreciated, that the context in which the budget is set in is this emergency and this war happening in the Middle East. We can't avoid that. That will affect the cost of prices, that will affect the government's program in terms of its foreign relations, tourism, everything is affected. So James, I want to hear you specifically on this cap on fuel and in terms of the VAT. How do you think businesses will adjust to that, and what benefits may be passed on to the consumer? Because you realize I'm trying to really get to the fact of how do businesses pass on any of the cushion that governments have provided to them to the consumer. And then I'm going to shoot over to you, Maureen.
So that largely depends on how fuel dependent your business is. So if you run a transportation company, fuel is going to be a large component of your cost inputs. If you run a highly energy intensive company, uses a lot of electricity, then you're using heavy fuel oil, and then that is the one that has been subject then to the hedging. So therefore, you could expect that if you have a very highly energy intensive business industry and the fuel does creep up, that you will get some of that being passed on through the natural course of business. But one of the things this really highlights for us, and I want to frame this a different way now, this really highlights the importance of how we use energy, how efficiently we use energy, and the type of energy that we use. You see, we're very dependent on external petroleum products from elsewhere. And we see something that's happening half a world away, and it's impacting us right here in our pockets, okay? So this then should really drive home to everybody, if it hasn't already, the importance of the changes to the transition to renewable energy, the making sure that we have as efficient vehicle transport as possible. You can see it with electric buses, electric cars, hybrid cars. And it goes beyond that, and Darrell mentioned this initially when he talked about flyovers. our traffic congestion, and this was mentioned, traffic congestion is a serious problem, and that just eats fuel unnecessarily and wastes people's time from a productivity point of view. If everybody spends an extra half an hour or hour in a car that they don't need to on a day, you're burning gasoline or diesel, or electricity if you have an electric car, plus you're wasting your time. So it just drives up your costs and it lowers our productivity. It reduces our efficiency. So I think we need to really focus on the efficiency of things, wean us off of the petroleum products so that we're less impacted by these sort of price shocks that happen externally that we have little to no control over.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. What I wanted to do now, I want to get into a discussion, and I've not really heard this in other spaces, and I think, Maureen, you alluded to it, in terms of how can a budget affect the social structure or dynamics of a society. So a budget's a programming document for all intents and purposes. You're trying to change behavior, you're trying to provide incentives, whether it's for businesses, for consumers, families, whatever your primary goals are, and you're trying to achieve that through a budget. Obviously, you can't achieve that through a one document set speech. And my critique of budgets is that they're often too long. They're a wish list of things. This budget had 63 measures in all, and by some comparisons, that's short. Because we've seen longer lists of measures. So, maybe there's some commendability in terms of that, but still not short enough. Really, the question is, should these documents be more focused on what are the primary goals of a government and how are you using tax policy and economic policy to drive those things? Because realistically, can we achieve the 63 measures in this budget? Some of them sound really good. The Green Initiative, Industrialization Initiative, sounds like a brilliant policy. How achievable is that within the timeline? What resources will be put to achieve that? So I want us to unpack really, how do you think some of the big measures that you have identified in the budget, how do you think they can be achieved? And if they can't be, or what would you suggest to the government to make them more achievable? Maureen?
Well, okay. You said a lot, and I want to unpack what you said. Because, one of the questions that anybody could ask, could the budget have done more? Maybe, maybe not. I suspect that the budget changed closer to the day of delivery because of what was happening to make allowances for the relief that consumers were crying out, the people of Barbados were crying out for. And I like that about the government. I like that. But then inside the budget, you have all these grandiose ideas, what I would call incremental transformation in various sectors, across sectors. I go back to the 6 mission transformation agenda with the climate change, with the digital transformation, with the economic diversification. You'll remember, I don't remember all of them, but that the budget was built on those pillars. So I am saying, can the government undertake all those things? You put them in the budget, you present them to the people, but how are you going to implement all those projects? You need planning, you need funding, you need other things to make sure that these things actually are implemented. While they have the potential to induce or encourage structural transformation in Barbados, them being on paper are theoretical. You do not have a pathway on how to achieve them. And as far as I'm concerned, Barbados is undertaking too many projects at the same time to undertake what we are calling modernization. But again, I go back. You have modernization and then you have structural transformation. Modernization just improves how the thing works. But structural transformation changes the entire thing so that it benefits. So that people can see that you're on the path where the Barbados can grow, that the average person can benefit from the growth, the average person can benefit from the investments that you want to attract, the average person can benefit from the climate resilience that you're building, the average person can benefit from the digital transformation, and you want to also move away from climate projects. You want to make Barbados in such a way that it's climate resilient in the sense that it has these massive projects that say, hey, look, we are going to get some revenue from this. This is what we can do as a small island developing state. So I am saying all the measures so far seem to be incremental improvements. They do not speak and tell us how you're going to get this structural transformation. Again, it's about modernizing. But how can you modernize at this rate? How can you modernize and engage in so many sectors at the same time? You have all these sectors. You've looked at, you've identified projects that you want to undertake. How can you do all of that together? If you look at the thing structurally, you would prioritize. You would see which one needs to be done. You would transform that completely. Then we can see results coming from it. Then you move on to the other. But you have a whole cacophony of ideas, of projects. Good. Very, very good, because you've moved from the stabilizing part of the BERT 3.0, you've gone on to the transformation. And the Prime Minister did say, we are going to move to transformation and beyond transformation to becoming competitive and resilient. But how do you get there? You get there by drilling down the structural structures, or for lack of a better word, the apparatus. You drill it down, you rip it apart, and you build again. But this time you build with purpose. You build with a vision in mind that the country as a whole is going to advance, it's going to grow, it's going to attract investment, it's going to be competitive, it's going to be resilient. But I cannot see all of that from this budget, but it's a good budget on paper. And the intentions are well. I praise the government for hearing the cries of the people, for hearing the heart of the people, because of the immediacy of the burden of the impact from the global pressures that we are faced with.
Darrell, I want to come to you, and I want to go back to something that caught my attention that you said earlier in terms about the budget not being a document focused on encouraging investment at the individual level. And how do you get, or how does a government get to do that? Because I think what you were getting at is that the government wants to do something for everybody. Yeah. But the reality is the government can't do something for everybody. And how does it, goes back to Maureen saying, how do you create the priorities of what a government needs to do to build out the whole society so that some folks can protect themselves and don't need government assistance, so that you can focus on the real vulnerable folks. In the budget, I think middle class folks got a 1% tax relief. But then it doesn't put middle class folks in a position to invest or to do anything to help other folks. So how would you go about that?
Okay. Well, you said a lot, and Maureen Holder said a lot also. And I just want to, before getting directly to that, to point out that Minister Strawn did say that based on the budget from last year, 2025, that as of January this year, they did achieve 79% of what they set out to, and that they are predicting that by the end of March, the figure that he gave is 96%. So
I would like to see the data for that and whose measure. Well, that's 79%.
I am not here to represent the minister.
I understand.
Even though I am his constituent. Sure. But I have to take what he says at face value, because whatever we can speak for an hour, like it or not, the government has achieved credibility. They have, I have a whole set of notes on things that have gone well, and we're not here to talk about only the things that have gone well. But I think we need to give the government a bit of breathing room. Let's see if they will do what they set out to do. And I agree, some of the ideas are quite lofty in terms of increasing the trade income from 700 million to 6 billion US, and then is it 10 billion within a decade? I think my figures may be a bit off, but they need to be given a chance to do what they say they're going to do, because they've proven over this time that they do most of what they set out to do. And we are very hard when we speak about the things that they don't do. But specifically, with respect to your question on how do you transform the society, I think that a budget is really, I see it as a whole psychological endeavor. Leading up to the day, everybody is interviewed, what it is you want from the government, and everybody says, I want more money, I want this, poor people this, but nobody ever says, well, I want to see Barbados as the leader in CARICOM, having the biggest growth, or it's all about self. And the Prime Minister spoke, I listened to her speech in the closing of the budget, and she said that when she was growing up, this country had oil, this country had bauxite, but all Barbados had was the people. And what you just said there, we can't do anything here without the people. And I believe there's a big gap that is taking place, because there's a whole batch of people there who are not being empowered to be self-reliant. But we're talking about resilience. The whole budget is about resilience. But the people that we are giving things to, they are not being trained how to be resilient. And it has to start from small steps. So I remember there was a time in Barbados, excuse me, I'm running out of breath. There was a time in Barbados when the whole thing was about the budget. How else can I invest? You put 10,000 in this and 2,000 in that, and you could get back tax returns. And as a banker, I saw people coming into the bank, even taking loans to invest the money. But now, people don't take people take loans to FET. With the abolition of the minimum savings rate, there's no incentive really to save. And what you said there about that 1%, and you refer to the middle class, but I prefer to refer to middle income, because your salary could change and move you from one class to the next. So I talk in middle income. Listen to what everybody said. This person gets this decrease, this person, and there's more money in your hands to spend. But nobody is teaching anybody how to be financially intelligent to invest. And all this money that we are giving out, the government has created this fantastic initiative where every child born after November 1st, 30th from the date of republicanism gets this investment, and parents can also add to it. So when we give out all of this money, why don't we build in systems that train people how to invest? And I'm not saying to save, because for the average person, savings is just an account where money is until you need it. I mean, inculcating a culture of investment. So when we gave out that $300 to everybody, why didn't we append to it a requirement that X% had to be invested? Why can't we create, to answer the question about how do you transform and make a budget work, why can't we create a national fund where people are forced, mandated to invest some portion, even if it's 1%, right? 10%. And then we have this fund, whether it is in real estate or something. I'm not an investment banker, but to train people that every time you have money, it's not only to blow it and spend it and go out there, and then what do you do? Then you come back and next budget, what does the government have for me? So to me, the budget has to, we speak about people. Barbados has people. There are some people who don't need to be told, invest. And the people who we are speaking to the most, we're telling them all the right things except that one piece. And I think that it is a small gap that is going to become quite big in time to come.
But Darrell, I hope you're not saying that the government should not have social security nets for the most vulnerable in our society. Because
I don't think he's saying that.
Because
that's not what I hear.
But
we're going to have to go for the break and come back in a few seconds. And we are back. We were just about to get into a heated discussion here. Maureen?
Yes, I mean, look, the government has a duty of care, or care of duty, however you want to put it, to look out for the most vulnerable in our society. And they've done that, all right? The budget is what it is, a compilation of intentions, what the government hoped to achieve in terms of maintaining fiscal stability, in terms of making sure our social services are upkept, making sure that the infrastructural development and all kinds of things happen that is good for the country. So I don't understand the points that you're making in relation to, are you saying that a budget should contain financial literacy or make provisions to teach people how to invest? That's not the role of a budget. And what if the government gives the most vulnerable in our society an increase on what they're getting? It is because there's a need for it, and I maintain there are vulnerable people in this society, and Prime Minister said it herself, through no fault of their own, find themselves in a very disadvantaged position. So are you saying the government is not supposed to look out for those people? Of course the budget has to have things in it that will keep that group, that will protect the most vulnerable in our society. If not, it will be an uncaring government. So the whole notion of teaching people how to invest, the little 300 or the increase in the money that they get, that is something outside of the budget's purview. That is financial literacy, and that's where the credit unions, that's where the little susus, that's where organizations like mine and other organizations, even the Chamber of Commerce, even the private sector trade team, that's where those organizations come in to offer programs, solutions, and courses for that type of thing. But I can't agree with you, Mr. Wilson. I can't.
Let's give Darrell
Sure.
a chance. All of a sudden it became Mr. Wilson.
Yes. And I would like to say that if I meant to say that the government shouldn't take care of the most vulnerable, I would have actually said that.
Correct.
Let's not get excessive in our responses, Ms. Holder. Clearly, there will always be people who are the most vulnerable, and you have to take care of them. What I'm trying to say, and before I say that, I want to disagree with you emphatically about the government not having a responsibility to teach people about financial literacy, because they do it to some extent. I mean, that's one area where I would fail the government. They could be doing far more, but the government is doing that.
You're not in the budget, Mr. Wilson.
The trust loans.
Yep.
You don't just get the loan. You have to get financial guidance and information, and you have to take a course to be approved for the loan. And also, there's a financial literacy program in the government that has 3 tiers that teach the community, teach schools and businesses.
We're talking about a budget, sir.
Yes,
we're
but I'm saying
about a budget.
I am aware we're talking about the
you're
budget.
suggesting-
But Maureen, in all fairness to Darrell, I think it wasn't this budget, obviously, but I think it was the previous to the one before that. They did have financial literacy programs introduced in the budget to deal with exactly this point of investment.
Yes.
Because I think the government was of the view that when we start giving money, we just don't want people to be spending that money. However, that seems slightly counter-intuitive to the government's budget, where it's trying to spur people to spend money to keep the economy rolling over. So you have two goals kind of butting heads here.
Right.
They want you to save because they have created the financial literacy programs. However, they want to encourage spending because in a small open economy like ours, money needs to keep moving and keep turning the economy.
Yes.
So in answering the question, I was just trying to say that I identify a gap. And we're talking about a budget. The government can't do everything in 1 year and with one budget. So what I'm saying is that this has to take years of work. And the same way, I watched the way that this government started, and the Prime Minister speaks. She's a very motivational speaker, and she took Barbados from a place that it didn't want to be, where Barbadians came to believe in themselves and have more confidence and started to do things. All I'm saying is that little piece, that little piece about making people more responsible financially, not just because there are people who will get the tax break and they will do a different thing from somebody else who will just take it and go and buy jeans. And I'm just saying that's a gap.
And that's a fair point, and I will disagree with you. It's not a little piece. It's a very big piece. And it's not only about financial responsibility, it's about social responsibility. Right. Because I think we can all agree that there's a general sense that there's a breakdown of some of that social responsibility, which is spilling over into broader issues, whether it's crime, whether it's violence, whether it's aggression on our roads, whether it's that ZR culture. All of these things need to be addressed. I'm not saying that the budget addresses those things directly, but a budget has to also be a social programming and engineering document. And I think if the government was trying to do that, they need to be explicit. There's no need to hide your social engineering program. If you were saying, look, the budget's supposed to be moving you from here behavior to this behavior, tell us what that behavior is, and push the policies in that particular direction to achieve that particular result. James, I want to come to you in terms of this point. In terms of what do you see in terms of the budget for the savings for the, I'm going to use the word, middle income?
Yes.
Middle income folks who got a 1%. And for some of the numbers pumped up by PwC and EY, it's about between $400 and $800 more per year. That's not a big rise for our middle income groups who feel vulnerable themselves. You talk to them on a daily basis, they feel stretched, and they have large mortgages. So we have a lot of folks who are, asset rich, but in terms of cash, very cash poor. And that group feels often trapped because they feel neglected. They can't get the kind of support that vulnerable groups will get, but at the same point, they can't access the high-end capital. What do? They've got a 1%, $800 more, $400 more in your hand per year. You've got 2 kids. That's not going to take you very far.
So let me just think the best way to look at this. I'm going to go to something Darrell says, and this is something the private sector has been asking for a long time. Okay, you get a 1% reduction in your income tax rate. Okay. Years ago, you used to be able to, when you invested, Darrell said, you did an investment and there was a tax rebate, all right? And often a significant one, all right, which helped put some more money in your pocket, which you could either spend on your necessities, your kids or food or whatever, or you could reinvest it if you wanted to, okay? And private sector, all of those were taken away one by one, even down to the ones that help you with your retirement savings and so on. And this is one of the things, so I applaud the government for moving the taxable non-threshold from 50 to 75,000 for pensions. But we really would like to have seen some incentive, and again, incentives for people to invest, all right? I know that they have the innovation and growth market to be launched and trying to get businesses, small businesses and so on, launched on a stock market, a junior market, and that will allow people to invest even small amounts. So that's a good thing. The National Financial Literacy Program you spoke about, the three tier, is also a good thing. It takes time for these to come into place, but they seem to be growing quite quickly. But other than that, Ronnie, you're looking at efficiency. In other words, how best can you work with what you have? And again, there's this whole system, okay? And we're talking about modulating or mitigating some of the issues that we're having now with price increases, trying to keep everybody, price increases. To Maureen's point about inherent structural issues, I'll give you a concrete example of that is improving the efficiency of how we move goods through the port when it lands here. We may not have control over shipping costs or even our supplier costs, but for any time it lands in this country, we have control over what it costs us to get it through there. Okay? So those transit costs, transportation costs, all of these things. If we can address these issues and improve our efficiency, we can really make a stab at the cost of living and mitigating that. Join that to an increase in productivity and so on, people, you would then really see things start to happen. All right, but yeah, to as a tax relief, it used to be you get the tax relief on investments, and that there was always very, very appreciated. And Darrell is right. People would wait for money, whatever it was, to try to get that there to invest and so on. That companies would then have money to grow, and then you have some kind of investment that you can use at a point when you may want something. You may wish to buy a house, you may wish to pay off your mortgage and this type of thing. Yeah.
All right. Well, I want to address one thing quickly, and we're coming to the home stretch, and that is the issue of traffic congestion and flyovers. Very controversial idea, and I want to hear your opinions quickly on what you think that we should be doing to address traffic congestion, because traffic congestion is eating away at economic productivity, all kind of productivity for schools, everybody. You know, it takes a good hour and a half to get from the north, if you live in St. Lucie, St. Peter, anywhere up to the university and past. And don't talk about going to the South Coast, because that's 2 hours. Just, you know, seriously, straightforward. 2 hours coming from the north. You could be there for at least hour and a half, 2 hours. So what do you think we can do to deal with this traffic congestion? 30 seconds, everybody, and then we're going to come to the wrap-up.
I like the idea of phasing these school times, the start of school times, work from home, which used to be popular but became unpopular. But I want to say the biggest thing that we need to do is with the flyovers, where we had to pay $20 million in penalties because of a wrong decision. Since we're going back to the same company, I would like them to give us consideration for some of that $20 million.
Okay. All right. Maureen, 30 seconds.
Listen, I am thinking about, we had talked about a ferry system that would ferry people from one part of the island to the other. People leave home their cars. If they have to work in Bridgetown, they'll catch the ferry maybe from Iceland and come down. That could probably work if we put our heads to it, our minds to it, and have something like that. I am not keen on the flowers because of how our topography, we are limestone country. If we can find the areas where we can build them, fine, I would support it. But carpooling is good. The ferry system is even better because we have more cars than we are able to facilitate on our roads. Barbados is a 2x6 little island. We have so many cars using the roads all at the same time. So I don't know anything that we do is going to help. But let's be practical. Let's find a ferry system because it means getting off the road.
Let's start with some simple things. Potholes, excavations, all of these things, they all impede the flow of traffic. When we have so much flow, even something as simple as a hole in the road that people have to dodge. Somebody parking their car because they're going to the bank machine, but they don't want to go and park in the car park across the road, and they block a lane of traffic. Traffic lights that work on timing rather than traffic flows. Terrible bottlenecks. There's simple things that can be done to ease traffic in certain areas. The flyovers, I think you're going to have them in certain locations. It just, the amount of traffic coming in and out of town is incredible. But improved public transport, yes, and specific public transport corridors to the extent that we can do this if we have the space. They do it in European cities and so on, especially because they're very tight. They will have a tram that runs in. You park outside the city and a tram runs in and does a circuit. You can get in that way so that you don't have all these people trying to get into all this one spot at the same time. But you know, good public transportation, even from a school point of view, would help tremendously. Yeah.
Change the times.
Change the times, but even something that you could get people, collect them at a point and then have a single mode of transport going in. You got 500 students and you've got 400 cars, you know, maybe you could have 500 students and 50 cars and the rest are you know.
Well, I would say fix public transport, start there. I think often, and this is not necessarily a critique of this government, but government, the concept is that governments like to build their way out of problems. So we like concrete to fix problems rather than, as you said, sometimes the simple, straightforward solutions, work from home, staggered times, public transport, proper functioning roads. But you know, the quick fancy solution is flyovers. Flyovers often lead to new traffic jams and new bottlenecks, and that's what the studies show. We are at the home stretch, and I'm going to give all of our guests 30 seconds to wrap up, and we're not rating the budget tonight, but just tell me your overall view of the budget. James, let's start with James Clarke, Chairman of the Barbados Private Sector Association.
So again, the budget, again, I like the mitigating measures for the current issues that we face in reality. I like the incentives that there are say for agriculture and so on, tourism, to try to help some of the improve the efficiency and also provide some incentives where that's concerned. The Green Industrial Gateway Advantage, I applaud the government for taking us in a direction maybe away or diversifying our industrial product. What we want to see is what it is exactly, how it is going to work, how is it envisaged, and Maureen did raise this point. How is this all going to work? We want to know. We're ready here. We want to get on board, right? Because this is going in new directions for us. But how is it going to work? What does it look like? And that we can actually get in and drive it and participate.
No?
I would say that I'm very pleased with the government. I applaud the minister and his advisors. I would say that it's not perfect, and we can't please everybody all of the time. My thing about it is that there's a lot of effort in the government to help a certain group of people, and my thing is that we are not really helping those people long term, sustainably, and it's sort of giving somebody a fish instead of teaching them to fish, and I believe in that strongly, and I think we need to do more work with that class of people, that group.
Okay.
Well, we don't have enough time for me to debate Mr. Wilson on that point. But let me just say, while we support the relief measures that the budget has offered, we believe that equal priority should be given to reform, and BCEN's position therefore is straightforward. Relief is necessary, but structural reform is essential. And if we're going to reduce consumer vulnerability in any way or maintain a good cost of living that everybody can enjoy, we must look at structural transformation.
All right. I want to say thank you for joining me on the 2026 Budget Review. I was your host, Ronnie Yearwood. With me, we had James Clarke from the Barbados Private Sector Association, Darrell Wilson, the advisory lead at Avenica Financial Advisory, and our queen,
And not the lady of the night.
Maureen Holder, the Executive Chairman of the Barbados Consumer Empowerment Network.
Thank you.
I want to thank you, ladies and gentlemen, those watching us on CBC TV and those watching us online in Barbados and across the Caribbean for joining. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Good night.